Hi, I'm Dan Herbert, course developer and tutor at Point Blank Music School. This is the second video in this series, in which we're going to look at the Analogue synth engine within Rounds. We cover the different elements of Complete in our sound design courses and diplomas here at Point Blank. To find out more information on our courses in London, LA and online, head over to pointblanklondon.com and make sure to check out the other videos in this series. So that was some example sounds from the Analogue synth engine within Rounds. The Analogue synth was inspired by a classic 2-oscillator synthesizer with a 4-pole multimode filter and includes a number of features, including FM synthesis, oscillator sync, as well as a range of modulation options. You can see here the synth panel is divided up into 5 sections: master pitch, oscillator, filter, modulation, and output. To start with, I'm going to select the Init Rounds snapshot, which you'll find from the Created for Arpeggiator bank. And this basically resets all parameters to their default settings. I'm also going to turn off these additional cells, so we're just listening to sound 1. And we've also got sound 1 selected in the soundbar. I'm going to move this across so we can actually see the spectrum view and oscilloscope. It's just a little ensemble I've created so we can see the sounds we are actually creating. So in the oscillator section, you'll notice we have 2 oscillators, oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. We can balance between these by using the mix control here. All the way to the right, we will hear oscillator 2. All the way to the left is oscillator 1. And we can select the different waveforms simply by clicking on the waveform button. So there's some noise, triangle wave, sawtooth wave. Oscillator 2, sawtooth, pulse wave, square wave, triangle wave, back to sawtooth. In between is a semi-control, and this basically offsets the pitch between the 2 oscillators. If I just double click here on the mix to reset it to its default setting. So values of 7 can work nicely, 12 is an octave. We can also go to values like 15 or 16. So that would work really nicely with a bit of a glide. So this parameter basically sets the amount of time it takes to glide between the notes. Up above glide, we have the master pitch controls. So this will set the pitch for each sound and detune as well. So these are really useful when stacking sounds together in multi-chord or layer mode. Again, double-clicking resets the value. Down at the bottom of the oscillator section, we have some additional parameters. PW stands for pulse width, and we'll adjust the pulse width of both oscillators when they're set to pulse. Let's switch oscillator 2 to a pulse and turn the mix all the way. So we can see up in the oscilloscope view, we've got a square wave, and as I adjust the pulse width, we can see and hear how it affects the shape of the waveform and the frequency content of the sound as well. The fine control here only affects oscillator 2. So really to hear its effect, we need to listen to oscillator 1 at the same time. Let's reset semi as well, so we get that typical rich detuned sound. Now underneath the pitch offset control is the sync button, and this determines how oscillator 2 syncs to oscillator 1, and it works by resyncing the phase of the oscillator. So if I just switch this to sawtooth to start with, now you'll be able to actually notice a difference in sound. So that sounds slightly phasey. If we sync the 2 together, and you can hear how that's tightening up the sound. Now if we push the pitch offset and look at the oscilloscope, you can see it's creating a kind of double-edged saw, and we're getting buzzier textures. And this is a great parameter to modulate. Let's try a pulse wave as well. You get these kind of screaming textures. In addition, we can select sub 1, and that drops oscillator 2 by an octave, or sub 2. drops it by 2 octaves, and the waveforms are still synced. Down here we have Xmod, and this introduces FM synthesis and basically controls the modulation amount, with oscillator 2 modulating the frequency of oscillator 1. We explain some of the principles of FM synthesis in the next video, but for now, if we set the balance to only oscillator 1 and increase the Xmod, we can hear the type of textures created. So we get these inharmonic type sounds, and you'll find the waveform and also the tuning can have a significant impact on the sound. Awesome. So let's just reset that. So over here we have the filter section with a multi-mode filter. So to select the filter type, we click on this button here. So band pass, high pass, or low pass. And we've also got the cutoff and standard resonance control. Now the filter can be modulated directly by the sources below. Envelope with the attack and decay settings. Now this is a bipolar control, so at 12 o'clock no modulation. If we just pull the cutoff down, so that's closing the filter. If I go this way, anti-clockwise, it now inverts the shape of that envelope and opens the filter. We can set the modulation amount to taste. FM here basically sets the amount that oscillator 2 modulates the cutoff, and we get some real growly textures on this. Awesome. And if you push the filter really hard, so let's push up the level here and also the resonance, you get some real nice kind of saturated textures. Nice. And in addition, we have key tracking here. So basically, if you increase this as you play higher on your keyboard, the filter opens up. If we move on to the modulation section, you can see the LFO, which has 4 waveforms: triangle, saw, pulse, and random. And you can easily assign a parameter to the LFO just by clicking here. So at the moment that's on cutoff, we can modulate pan, level, pitch, semi, pulse width, and mix. And again, to modulate a parameter, you just increase the modulation amount. Now the speed of the LFO is controlled by this parameter here. At the moment that's set to Hertz, and that will freewheel, or you can sync it to your host DAW by choosing note. And we can choose a specific note value to sync it to. The phase of the LFO can be reset by enabling this button. So every time I play a note, the waveform is re-triggered. Below this we have the envelope, which we've already seen when we looked at the filter section, but we can assign it to some additional parameters. So we could assign it to the pitch, semi, pulse width, Xmod, mix, or FM modulation amount. And again, this mod amount is a bipolar control. Let's just reset the LFO there. Now just to the right of where it says end, we have 3 additional buttons, with key tracking, which affects the attack and decay times, and velocity sensitivity, which affects the modulation amount. So if I just to enable velocity sensitivity, as I play harder, it modulates the pitch more. The other parameter here is a loop button, and this will basically loop round the envelope. So after the attack and decay phase, it will then go back to the beginning. So essentially we could use this like another LFO. The final section here is the output and contains the delay and reverb sends to the 2 awesome sounding global effects, pan and level controls, and then a standard ADSR envelope, which can be affected by key tracking and velocity sensitivity, as we saw with the mod envelope. And finally, if you create sounds, you want to copy them across onto a new sound, just right click and then you can drag and drop onto sound 2, for example, and now 1 and 2 have got identical sounds. Or if you wanted to copy it onto 3, again drag and drop onto 3, and these sounds are now identical.